are you doing that? Stop share. There we go. Much better. Whoops. Okay. Good morning, good day, good evening, depending on where you are. My name is Alyssa Wolf. I wear many hats here at Shelton Lawn Associates, and I'll be leading our conversation today around A to Z, the 5 steps of due diligence. Before we get started, and let's go back to our, let me just see, make sure we're doing, here we go. There we are, and come on, there we go. Okay. So before we get started, I just want to tell you a little bit about our founding attorney, Lynn Shelton. Lynn was not always a franchise attorney. She has deep roots in business as an entrepreneur. She actually grew a franchise system to upwards of 780 locations. This was in the medical billing, medical claims space long before, it was precedent setting because there was nothing like it. And so, oftentimes we learn the most from the experiences we embark on. And so Lynn grew that franchise very successfully. She's also been a past franchisee. So she knows many sides of the equation, not just that as a franchisor, but also what does it mean to invest in a franchise system as a franchisee, and how do you go about growing that business. She's also a very layered person, very much an extrovert. She is a published author, and in fact, there is her book is on Amazon. I'll be happy to give you more information on that. And it actually talks about, it's called Your Journey into Franchise Ownership. So for any of you for whom this is brand new, maybe you've been in corporate America and been very successful, but you might be embarking on business ownership for the first time. Might be a great resource for you. Lynn also dedicates herself outside of work to helping others. She's, for more than 10 years, she's visited nations abroad, a great deal in South Africa, to help educate and coach youth in life skills as well as entrepreneurship. And so very honored to be part of her team here at Shelton Law. Okay, funding your franchise. There are several steps, several items that are pertinent to growing a franchise, to starting, or even just evaluating a franchise. What are the things to look at? We're going to talk about these things today. Consulting the pros. Who are the subject matter experts? Who are other franchise industry or business industry subject matter experts who can prove to be very productive allies and coaches, advisors to you? Roles and responsibilities. What does it really mean and look like to be a franchise owner? Validation before you're actually committing to a franchise. What are some key questions to be thinking about and asking to other franchisees? And of course, questions to be asking the franchisor. We're going to take about 30, 40 minutes. My goodness, we could spend a lot longer on this, but we'll save questions to the end and be happy to address them for you. Okay, funding your franchise. Excuse me. So I'm sure that you've heard of all of these or many of these different funding options. There's no right or wrong. It's more about taking a practical look at your financial landscape. What can you afford? And that also ties into what we'll talk about also, is having a CPA or financial advisor to help you. But essentially, these are a variety of different funding resources that we frequently discuss with potential clients. We're not a funding resource ourselves, although we are connected to and network with a variety of different financial resources. The Rob's rollovers have become very popular. What might you have in savings? Is that even a financial pool that you want to touch when funding your franchise investment? Banks, credit unions, home equity lines of credit. The home equity line of credit, that is what we consider a very last resort. We highly discourage it for the simple reason that you're putting perhaps your most valuable asset on the line. And if you don't have to do that, we strongly encourage looking at other options wherever possible. Okay, consulting the pros. We've been talking about funding. Franchise consultants. We consider these folks the matchmakers. They represent a wide variety of brands, and they are compensated by the franchisors. You do not pay them, although always best to talk to them about, their compensation structure, just in case. But essentially, these are professionals who have dedicated themselves to not only understanding the brands, but understanding the fundamentals of what to look for and what to understand and how to qualify a potential franchisee. How does your equation, your personality, your professional background match or not with different franchise brands out there? And so we definitely encourage connecting with these professionals. They can be enormously helpful, save you a ton of time, and help introduce you to brands that maybe you wouldn't have considered or thought about without their introduction. Accountants, CPAs, your financial advisor, CPA, is just a fundamental ally and a subject matter expert to turn to. As we talked about, what can you afford? When looking at any business investment, it's not pie in the sky. And sometimes we can have rose-colored glasses if we're not careful, or we can perhaps have inflated optimism, if you will. And so really important to have that financial ally who can help sanitize the numbers and take a hard look at what are the numbers, what is the story that the numbers really tell. And so also now this is where the franchise disclosure document becomes very pertinent in your conversation. So if you haven't heard the term franchise disclosure document, or FDD as it's commonly referred to, the FTC, so franchising in the United States is tightly regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission requires any legitimate franchise in the US to have a credentialed compliant FDD. And so, and these are documents that are like 300 to 400 pages thick, minimally 100 pages. If somebody hands you an FDD and it's 20 pages, run. So, and you're not going to necessarily go through the whole FDD with your financial advisor or CPA, but some key areas, and you'll want to write this down. So first of all, your item 5, and there's always an index table of contents. Your item 5 is going to talk about the initial fees. There are initial fees. It's kind of a pay-to-play model in many cases, and typically these are fees that are non-refundable. And that may be hard to hear, but the franchisor is going to invest time, and so are you. And this is one layer, one way to really vet who's serious and who's not. So the item 5 covers the initial fees you'll pay to enter the system. And then your item 6 is going to cover ongoing fees that you will pay either to the franchisor and possibly its affiliates. Now, the item 7 covers all costs associated with your investment in the franchise, everything from soup to nuts. And so you'll want to have access to this as you're talking with your financial advisor, and certainly we'll get to in a moment, a well-vetted franchise attorney. Now, there is another item. Oh, excuse me. Before we get to the item 19, the item 7 also includes HR and staffing. Now, when I say that, what it's not going to include or stipulate is some kind of a salary for you. So, very critical that when you are extrapolating a business plan and determining your run rate for your possible investment, that you're looking at, okay, am I going to be working part-time? And if so, does the franchise system allow that? Number 2, what is it going to take if I'm going all in from the beginning as the owner operator? What is going to be needed financially in order to cover your existing costs and expenses? And that also will play into any funding you get, and that needs to be written into this item before it's finalized, so that, because the franchisor is not going to pay you a salary when you're a business owner now. And so again, what is the financial coverage you need 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 24 months as you're building your franchise to profitability? Now, the item 19 is where the franchisor is to disclose, and they don't have to. But when they do, they can't just cherry pick who their best franchisees are and represent their financials in that manner. They have to be able to give an average of what is produced, realistically generated. And so, but not all franchisors may choose to disclose. And so just be mindful of that, and definitely something to be aware of when you're going to speak with your franchise attorney. And that's next, and that's where we come in. So the franchise disclosure document, the franchise agreement, are very common ways in which we help potential clients. Again, these documents must be both federal and state compliant. And there are states in the US that are called registration states. And if you are going to do business, if you either live and are going to open in a registration state, make sure to find out whether that franchisor is already registered in that state. If they're not, they will need to apply for registration, and there must be an FDD that is compliant to that state's registration process. Excuse me 1 second. Okay, other areas that can be of equally critical importance. So, are you planning to go into this franchise solo? Or will you have an investment partner? Now, are you married? If you are married or in a registered domestic partnership, then you have a partner. And so key questions to be asking are, what role or not will my spouse be playing in the franchise business? And it can be important to set up a partner prenup agreement. There are certainly marital prenups. We can certainly do those. But in this case, what we are referring to is a prenup for your business. Very often people are going into business with family members or, other partners. This is the time to be asking the what if questions, and a well-vetted franchise attorney can be of great assistance in doing that. Things like, if you're the owner operator, what happens if you unexpectedly pass away? Who will step in and run the business? What happens if you become ill? Who is going to notify the employees? Who is physically going to go to the location if in fact it's a location-based business, and open for the day. Is your investment partner going to do that? Is it your spouse? Does it need to be someone else that perhaps you've been training all along to be that number two person to step in and cover you? Or maybe you're hiring, an operations manager. There's no two equations that are alike, but important to be asking those questions up front and putting things in writing so that should something tragic and unexpected happen, you're not making critical decisions under duress. I think we can all agree that when we're emotionally charged, we're trying to deal with a traumatic situation. That's not the time to be making critical business decisions. We can also help with lease reviews. If you're looking at a location-based system, you're going to be investing a ton of money in that lease. And so really important to align yourself with a well-vetted franchise attorney that has seen these things play out in real life, can review the lease, because commercial leases and franchising are not the same as a regular lease. And so really important to have somebody at your side to help step you through that, to optimize your position for the long haul. Site selection, another really critical piece in the process. And we're going to get to that in just a moment. CCIMs. This stands for Certified Commercial Investment Member. These are what we call the PhDs of commercial real estate. They've been in the industry for at least 10 years. And it's not just about location. Well, it is about location. But it's not just about understanding a territory, but what are the stories that the psychographics, demographics tell about different parts of an area and pertinent to your specific type of franchise. And this also can play into some of the data coming out this year from Fran Data is showing that the type of location, where it is, can have a lot to do with not only who your clientele is going to be, but also how easily you're going to be able to recruit talent to work within your franchise. So, definitely not a step to skip. And if you would, ask your franchisor, hey, who are some of the CCIMs that you work with? By the way, this is a professional organization, so there are CCIM chapters throughout the United States. You might look up the chapter local to your area and see who they recommend, or talk with a couple different CCIMs to decide who you want to work with. Okay, congratulations, you are a franchisee. Now what? First and foremost, one of the most compelling reasons to strongly consider even getting into a franchise system is that the reputable, proven brands are that because they've invested the time, effort, and money to prove the system, to build a brand that has stood the test of time, that is recognized, has brand integrity, is well known. Their systems work. That being said, your job as the owner operator is you're now the brand ambassador for your location. So really important that you're embracing the brand's image, the brand's processes, their systems, and that you're modeling that to your team, taking advantage of the business intelligence tools that your franchisor offers. What are the local marketing strategies? So depending upon how your franchisor, where they are in their journey of growth, okay? If they're a newer franchise, they may have chosen to launch regionally. If so, their role as the franchisor is to do regional marketing, which means they're creating visibility, they're creating brand recognition for the brand as a whole. What their marketing is not set up to do is to specifically drive traffic to your unique location. Certainly helps, but that's not the role of the franchisor's marketing strategy. That's your responsibility. So if marketing isn't in your own wheelhouse as the franchise owner operator, then really important, you're either looking at possibly hiring someone on payroll who has that experience, who can help you build the local strategies, or maybe outsourcing to a marketing firm that has experience in franchising, or certainly within your industry, so that again, you're building local marketing strategies that drive traffic to your location. HR and staffing, critical role. We're only as good as our weakest link, and also not everybody has experience hiring. So again, it's assessing what is, and hopefully you're doing this way beforehand, is you're taking a hard look at what is your own wheelhouse, who are the key members, who are your MVPs that you need to have as part of your core team to begin with. And for example, if you have experience hiring in the past, great, and you're able to leverage that. Or if your spouse is involved in the business and they have that skill, terrific. If not, you're aligning yourself with a staffing resource who has those skills and is set up to help you source the type of talent you need to staff your location. Operational playbooks, you need to eat, breathe, sleep this. Again, it's, opening that playbook, really just getting into it, understanding it, knowing it, and then executing. When you have questions, ask your franchisor. Also, another great area, and we'll talk about it in a little bit, about asking other franchisees what their experience with the operations book has been. Working within your budget, obviously critical to any business endeavor, and again, looking at, what's your core skill set. Maybe you have a background in, finance, bookkeeping, etc. However, and if you can handle the day-to-day and be transactional, or someone on your team, great. If you don't have that skill set, again, maybe outsourcing that from a transactional level to a bookkeeper, or check with your CPA. Maybe they have a bookkeeper on staff who can help you. But again, looking at making sure that you're constantly evaluating the numbers. What is the story, good or bad, that your budget's telling you? Areas to improve. Yes, as a new franchisee, really important that you build credibility, establish your credibility, demonstrate credibility. However, in that journey, it's not unusual for franchisees to identify areas for improvement. And when that happens, it might turn out to be something that not only could help your location, but it might prove to be something that can benefit the entire system. And so, again, this is where communication, building a close relationship with your franchisor comes in, documenting what you're encountering and presenting it to your franchisor so that you can have a discussion around it. And, maybe they recognize, wow, you've called something out that really makes sense. We do need to address it, not just for you, but this may be something we need to look at on a broader scale. What a great way to you're not just serving yourself, you're serving the franchise system and demonstrating value. And that's a great testimony. Rinse and repeat. Again, it's just learning each part of the business, working it, honing it, refining it, and executing day in and day out. Validation. Okay, So um, by this time, you you have decided that you feel strongly enough about the brand that you've probably paid the initial fee. And these questions come up either at discovery day, or you can absolutely, during the validation, and should be asking the franchisor for the names of franchisees in your area, and or not, maybe not in your direct area. And this is where a CCIM can be helpful, is find me another metro area similar to mine that has franchisees in it. And by the way, the franchisees, their names and contact information are listed in the FDD. Um, so, so we bring this up because let's imagine that you're going into a territory and there's another franchisee in that same territory. We're not saying don't talk to them. Absolutely talk to them. However, we're all human beings. And depending on how secure they are in their franchise, can influence how forthcoming, how transparent they may be or not. So if you're able to talk to them and then also get the contact information for another franchisee that is in a similar metro area or area, geographic area, with similar psychographics, customer behavior, you're then able to compare notes. And it's not just asking the first question, but what's the follow-up question? So for example, how good was the training? My personal preference is to ask a more open-ended question. What was your experience with the training? What did you, walking away from the training, what was most memorable for you? And then listen. And they might say, I found the marketing section to be extremely helpful. And then you say, well, why is that? Well, marketing isn't necessarily in my wheelhouse. And I found that, they were able to shed light on, I didn't really understand what the responsibility of the franchisee was. And I was able to gain insight through that process. Or they might, with a different franchise, they might say something like, well, I really wish they had spent more time on marketing. Marketing isn't necessarily my wheelhouse. It can vary. But the point being, you're listening for what they're sharing with you, comparing it to what you know about yourself and either the gaps or your strengths, and then also comparing it with what you're hearing from other franchisees in that same system. Are you hearing the same thing over and over again? Or if there are differences, what are they? How helpful is the operations manual? If they're saying, well, it really wasn't that helpful, well, tell me more. Why is that? And be listening for their answer. For some, operations may or may not be their wheelhouse. Perhaps they haven't hired someone. So again, listening for what you're hearing, how does that align with what you know about your own talent landscape and expectations and criteria for success? And then what are other franchisees telling you? Are you successful? So one of the key questions to ask, and this is a great question to explore at the very beginning of your process, is how are you as a future franchisee going to measure success? What does success mean to you? Is it all about the money? Is it a composite of, good, strong financial performance, being part of the community and giving back? Is it also, hey, I'm just looking to work part-time while my kids are in school, and does that franchise align with what you're trying to do? Because your goals, what that particular franchisee decided to do and what their criteria for success is may or may not be the same as yours. Doesn't mean one is wrong, better, good, but how do they align or not? Knowing what you know now, what do you think realistically a franchisee entering into this brand is capable of generating in their third, year one, year three, year five? And again, you're the one that has to do the doing. But this way, if you're talking to franchisees who are more than a year into their franchise system, and it would be worthwhile to talk to people who may be within their first year, but you're talking to franchisees who've been in the system longer, so you're able to get some trending analysis. Now, their success or not doesn't necessarily dictate yours, but good to have that data and be able to take it into consideration. Would you buy the same franchise again? Why or why not? Again, listening for those answers. Sometimes, and we've heard from people after the fact who we didn't necessarily work with from the beginning, is sometimes we don't know until we're in it. And sometimes people, they get into franchising and they realize, wow, I did not truly understand this was a 24/7 investment. And maybe they just decide it's not for them. Doesn't mean it's not for you, but good for you to have that awareness of what are you hearing from the different members of the franchise system. What's the trust factor between you and your franchisor? What kind of communication have you experienced? Now that you've been in the system for a while, how would you characterize the communication between you and your franchisor? What do you trust or not? What do you consider the franchisor's greatest strengths? What are maybe some areas of weakness or areas of improvement? Do you feel heard? We would say that, how closely a franchisor listens and treats the feedback from their franchisees, that is critical. Because if they're not listening, that may not be an issue for some franchisees, but we would sure encourage you to pay close attention, because it's setting a precedent. Do you attend the regional, national meetings, conventions? Why not? Of those that you've attended, what's been your greatest takeaway? And what feedback are you getting from your team? Very important to take into consideration not just what the operator owner is telling you, but what feedback are they getting from the members of their team? And by the way, if you would like a copy, these are just a few of the questions, but we would also be happy to email you a copy of more than 100 questions to ask. You can leave your information in the chat or email me separately. Talking to your franchisor. What does your top franchisee have that others don't? Hopefully, what you're hearing is they follow the system. You may hear other comments like, they operate a tight ship. They're great at staying connected to their community. They've embraced our brand culture. They have an incredible team. Their customer satisfaction numbers are through the roof. And yeah, operationally, they follow the system. What's your next big update or upgrade? How many people remember pagers? Okay. Are there any pager franchises in the US or anywhere for that matter? Believe it or not, there are. There are over 6,000 pager franchises. How is that even possible? It's possible for brands who pay attention and keep their ears, eyes, and nose to shifts in the market. And the pager franchises that are still here are here because they were paying attention to the shifts in the market. When smartphones, or well, first of all, cell phones, accessories, cell phones themselves, cell phone accessories. When smartphones came on the market, they augmented their inventory and product inventory in order to keep up with the demand of what customers were looking for. It's that simple yet complex. And so those brands are the ones that paid attention, listened, and responded to the demands of the market. By the same token, there are so many that I don't even need to name that we all know of who aren't here anymore because they didn't. What do you see coming down the road? And I'm not talking a year from now. Ask them, what is your analysis telling you 5 years, 10 years down the road? If they don't have an answer, pay attention, because this may not be a franchise. This is a flag. And say, well, what is your process for determining, making strategic decisions in order to keep pace with the market? And again, listen for their response, because if they don't have an answer, again, this may or may not be a brand that you want to invest in. They need to have those answers. They must have those answers. If they are coming from a place of complacency, they are prone to fall in the pattern of those who have fallen before them. Why should I attend the regional national meetings? What do you find? What is important for me to understand about those meetings, and why? What's the next personnel position you're going to fill? And what do they tell you? Are they hiring for quality control? Are they hiring for customer service? That is going to tell you. And if they're not hiring, that's also a flag, but that's going to tell you what's important to them. And then be weighing that with, how does that favorably or not impact you as a future franchisee? Okay, we've covered a lot of territory this morning. I want to thank you so much. Are there any questions I can address? Let me take a drink while you're thinking about that. Okay. If you'd feel more comfortable having a one-to-one conversation, you're welcome to text me at that number. As a gesture of thanks for joining us this morning, we do offer 10% off for you for services. This is a savings offering that does not expire. Again, we're happy. If you want to text us your email address or drop it in the chat, I'm happy to email you the more than 100 questions, as well as the slide deck if you'd like to have that. Again, we're here to help you with your franchise due diligence. There's no two situations that are alike, and it's best to have the conversation sooner versus later. Once you sign a franchise agreement, it's too late. We hope it's us, but if it's not us, please be seeking out a well-vetted franchise law firm that really has walked it out, has crafted FDDs from the beginning. Look for firms that take a tailored approach to each client. We are flat fee, but again, we would certainly love to speak with you if you're ready to do so. And once again, thank you so much for your time.